Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, January the 20th, 2025. And I'm going to start the video by looking at the main events happening this week, sort of blow by blow account, day by day. And of course, the first event is the Sun moving into Aquarius, and that's going to also be the main topic of this video, considering what it means for the Sun to be in Aquarius and in general what the sign Aquarius is all about. And having done the astrology, I'm going to consider the I Ching for the week. So I will be doing an I Ching reading, looking at what the week ahead is going to be like from a perspective of a general picture, then money, then career, and then relationships. So let's start off by looking at the main events this week. I suppose I have to ask, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, do feel free to subscribe. Anyway, let's look at the week starting on Monday, January the 20th. Now, by the way, if you're interested, the reason I've got a tank there is because I do think that there is an association with the sign Aquarius and totalitarianism and the power of the government, but I'll be looking at that a little bit later. Let's start by looking at the positions of the planets as the week starts. New York time, midnight, Monday, January the 20th, and we notice that as the week starts, the Sun is at 0 degrees 23 Aquarius. So that's a reminder that really the Sun is in Aquarius all week long. So the Sun is out of Capricorn, and that does change the balance. Jupiter is in Gemini. It will be in Gemini until June. Gemini is an air sign, so we've now got the Sun in Aquarius, an air sign. You've got Jupiter in Gemini and Jupiter in Gemini, which is an air sign. And actually, at the beginning of this week, we've got the moon in Libra, another air sign. So there is quite an airy feel, which contrasts with that earthy build-up we had. When we had planets in Capricorn. Now the only two planets in Earth signs are Mercury and Uranus. So we've still got Mercury in Capricorn there, Uranus in Taurus. I mean, it means something. There is some concept of how important the material world is, but air is about ideas and thinking about things, and also being able to talk about things. But with the Sun in Aquarius, as I'll be talking about it, I'll be talking about it later, but the Sun has moved into a fixed sign. So in Capricorn, the Sun was in a cardinal sign, but now it's fixed. So some people might be quite fixated on their own opinions, and agreement might be difficult to find. And of course, the week starts with the inauguration of Donald Trump as president. In tomorrow's video, I'm going to be looking at the inauguration, or not tomorrow's video. In the video for Monday, I'm going to be looking at the inauguration of Donald Trump. But the inaugurations always happen on the 20th, I think, unless the 20th falls on a Sunday, in which case the inauguration happens on a Monday. But by and large, inaugurations happen when the Sun is at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that is a feature of the American presidency, and I will be talking about that a little bit later. And so, aside from the Sun moving into Aquarius, the Sun makes a conjunction to Pluto. So Pluto at the moment is right at the beginning of Aquarius. In fact, over the next few years, the Sun will be at the beginning of Aquarius. So around January the 20th, when the Sun moves into Aquarius, it will be making a conjunction to Pluto. So, with the Sun conjunct Pluto on Monday, there is a sense of power. Who has the power? Is it you? Is it someone else? And it may feel a little bit overwhelming if you feel that someone else has got all the power, or maybe it's a government that's got the power. That can be Sun conjunct Pluto, but it can work the other way. With Sun conjunct Pluto, it may encourage many of us to use all the power we have got, and it in fact might be an option. Some of us with Sun conjunct Pluto may actually underestimate how much power we have. Though I must say one thing about Sun moving into Aquarius. Again, I will be going into more detail about this later, but the Sun is in its detriment in Aquarius. Sun rules Leo, it's in its detriment in Aquarius. And that, I think, is sometimes forgotten. And with Sun conjunct Pluto, a Sun in its detriment conjunct Pluto, it can be overwhelming. The Sun is trying to assert itself, but Pluto represents some big force. And that might be our imagination, but it might be something real. And if you happen to be a Democrat or you can't stand Donald Trump, then that might be how it feels when you see Donald Trump being inaugurated as president. I'm not giving any opinion here. I'm neutral. But opponents of Trump, there are people that absolutely can't stand him. Yeah, maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed that Trump is going to be president for the next 4 years. A different feeling if you're a supporter of Trump. Sun conjunct Pluto, you might feel that you've got your power back. So the way people respond to Trump becoming president with Sun conjunct Pluto may be about power, feeling you've got your power back, or feeling you've lost your power, that there is a power issue with this Sun conjunct Pluto. And the Sun is not just making a conjunction to Pluto, it is making an aspect to Saturn. It's making a semi-square to Saturn, and this semi-square which takes place, well, it's actually exact on Tuesday. The Sun conjunct Pluto is also exact on Tuesday. So if you want to be really exact about it, Tuesday the 21st is when we feel the exact Sun Pluto conjunction, the exact Sun semi-square Saturn. But I think on Monday we're going to feel it also, particularly the Sun conjunct Pluto. So on Tuesday, with the Sun semi-square Saturn, as well as the Sun conjunct Pluto, Sun semi-square Saturn is a somewhat tough aspect, a feeling that we can't always express ourselves, especially as Saturn is semi-square Pluto as well. So Saturn semi-square Pluto is a tough aspect. It feels that we can't really fully express ourselves. Something is in the way. Now that Saturn semi-square Pluto, okay, I'm talking about it potentially being exact on Tuesday. The actual Saturn semi-square Pluto is not precisely exact. Let me just tell you when that Saturn semi-square Pluto is going to be exact. When it really comes together, it comes together on around sort of the 26th. Is that about the 26th, something like that? Around the 26th, at the end of a week, that Saturn is exactly 45 degrees from Pluto. But with the Sun making the semi-square to Saturn and making the conjunction to Pluto, it may feel itself to be exact on that Tuesday. So it's more about power, and do we have power, and how can we assert ourselves to the maximum? And it's all rather tough. And so overall, the beginning of a week could just feel quite heavy. And it's a last quarter moon as well on Tuesday. Sun square moon. So we had the full moon on the 13th, January the 13th. The moon has gone on, and now it's semi-square the sun. So last quarter moon, some of us might feel that something is over. It's come to an end. The cycle is coming to an end. But there's really not much we can do. And if you're into Chinese astrology, it's of course, just 1 week left or something like that. I think Chinese New Year, something like January the 29th, isn't it, with the new moon? So the Chinese New Year starts on the new moon, and I have been told that in terms of Chinese astrology, this is a time where you don't do things, even that for example, you don't buy shares in the stock market because it's the end of the year. You want to wait until the Chinese New Year. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's just a time of wrapping up as you prepare for the Chinese New Year. So it's not necessarily a good time to be starting new projects with this last quarter moon. And always, last quarter moon is not the most fortunate part of the cycle. And so, what were you trying to do over the last Chinese year? Perhaps you're just trying to finish things up. So that might be something to be thinking about over this week. And on Thursday, we've got Mars sextile Uranus. In fact, we've got a lot going on Thursday. That's Thursday the 23rd. We have got Mars sextile Uranus. We've got Mercury opposition Mars, and we've got Mercury trine Uranus. So Mars, Mercury, and Uranus are coming together in this combination. You can see here, if you've got Mercury is going to be opposition Mars, and you're going to have sextile Mars making the sextile to Mercury, Mercury making the trine to Uranus. So you can see that forming. Is it a good thing? Well, I think it could be a good thing in terms of taking the initiative, though we shouldn't forget that it is the end of a lunar cycle. It's the end of the Chinese year, and Mars sextile Uranus might sound a nice aspect because of a sextile, but you could just say, well, Mars and Uranus are making a contact, and Mars-Uranus contacts can be somewhat violent, can be willful, people wanting to get their way. And Mercury's opposition Mars. Mercury opposition Mars could be troublesome. I mean, you think with Mercury opposition Mars of arguments. Mercury is how you communicate. And so with Mercury opposition Mars, there might be a lot you want to say. And the things you say might be somewhat aggressive. Or you might be aware of other people being verbally aggressive. So there's a lot of mental action on Thursday. And with Mercury trine Uranus, that adds to the urgency. It really is something that we feel we need to express. And then the end of the week, we've got Venus trine Mars. We've got Venus in Pisces, trine Mars in Cancer. That's an aspect which is quite charismatic. Of course, Venus and Mars as a pair are often connected with sexuality and sexual attraction. And if we want to be charismatic with Venus trine Mars, maybe it's a time that we can do that. But this trine is in water signs, Venus in Pisces, Mars in Cancer. So it's not about making a big impression, it's about being more subtle about it. So if you want to be attractive, you don't have to go over the top. It's a lot to do with things that are subtle and focusing on feelings and body language with that Venus trine Mars. But if you want to make a good impression, if you want to attract someone, then I think with Venus trine Mars, that is something you can do. But the main thing going on this week is the sun moving into Aquarius. And what does it mean? Well, the sun doesn't work well in Aquarius, traditionally. This is because the sun rules Leo. And that means that when the sun is in the opposite sign, it is in its detriment. And if you want to take a point system, William Lilly in Christian Astrology has a table with all the points, and if a planet is in its own sign, it gets +5, and if it's in its detriment, it gets -5. So that means the sun loses strength as it moves into Aquarius. Now you might ask why. Well, there is a certain northern hemisphere bias to it. While the sun is moving into Leo, it is, in the northern hemisphere, it tends to be the hottest. And while the sun is moving into Aquarius, it tends to be cold, like it is now. And so from a northern hemisphere perspective, you might say, well, the sun is weak. What about if you're in the southern hemisphere? Does that mean that the sun is in its own sign in the southern hemisphere? No. I'm not going to give an adequate explanation for this bias. It could be that, as astrology developed in the classical world, in the northern hemisphere, these rulerships developed and they sort of kind of stuck and they became part of the collective. Now, this means, I would say, even if you are in Australia and it's high summer, I would still argue that the sun moving into Aquarius was about the sun moving into its detriment. I'm not saying I'm going to be able to argue that case really well, and there are going to be counter-arguments, but that is my subjective view. Now, one thing, when the sun moves from Capricorn into Aquarius, one thing actually doesn't change. The sun moves from a sign ruled by Saturn to another sign ruled by Saturn. So the sun is in a Saturn-ruled sign, for 2 months. But there is a difference between Capricorn and Aquarius. Capricorn is a negative sign. It's a feminine sign. Whereas Aquarius is positive and masculine. And Saturn is about control, wanting to be in control. And when Saturn is in Capricorn, it's a kind of control that I would have said was more passive. You just don't want anyone rocking the boat. You want to be able to predict what's going to happen. You want everything to be within particular boundaries. That might be the case when Saturn moves into Aquarius, but it's more dynamic. It's more positive. I don't just want to maintain the status quo with Saturn in Aquarius. I want to go further. I might be interested in really controlling people's lives, even controlling what people think about. And that is perhaps a problem with the sign Aquarius. And many people have kind of got Aquarius wrong, and one does wonder why. I think one of the reasons why people have got Aquarius wrong might have something to do with a huge conjunction that took place in 1962. So I think it was in February 1962 that there was a day when all of the traditional planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the whole lot were in Aquarius. And at the time, some people got really excited about it. This was the huge conjunction. This was the beginning of something. Oh, this was the beginning maybe of the age of Aquarius. So there are people that used to think the age of Aquarius actually started at the beginning of 1962. I mean, that is nonsense, but still, with that seven planet conjunction in that sign, there was excitement about it. There is another view that conjunction marked the birth of the Antichrist. I don't know about that, but The Antichrist now that would mean the Antichrist would be 60. How old? A bit older than me. I mean, I'm born in May, so the Antichrist would be just about to celebrate their 63rd birthday. But I think one's being frivolous here. The point is, there was excitement about the sign Aquarius, and this may have fed into the kind of atmosphere which led to that musical Hair. So Hair, late 1960s, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, possibly linked with that 1962 conjunction, and that's when that whole 1969, what is it, 1969? I don't know, I'm not sure on the precise date of Hair being launching, but there was this view that Aquarius was an exciting sign. It was forward-thinking, and it was humanitarian. It was nice, and this view of Aquarius has stuck. And to my mind, it's a completely false view of Aquarius. Aquarius is about the power of the government, and it's about totalitarianism, which is why I put a tank on the thumbnail. The government wants to be in control, and the government wants to be in control at many different levels. It doesn't just want to be in control on the surface. It wants to be in control, perhaps, of what we talk about. And with Pluto going into Aquarius, for example, I don't know whether it's true or not, but in the UK, they were talking about some law which would potentially prosecute people for talking about certain controversial subjects in the pub. I don't know whether that's true. It's probably the right-wing media exaggerating it, but that would be a very Aquarian thing to do, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, controlling what people can talk about, what people can say, what people can think about. That's all Aquarius. Aquarius has a connection with technology, and technology is, of course, a way in which people can be controlled and tracked. Yet there is another side to Aquarius, which I don't think we necessarily just get from Saturn in Aquarius. There has been an association between Uranus and Aquarius. I don't think that, well, I'm sure that Uranus does not rule Aquarius, but I admit there may be an association. And Uranus is a planet which is about revolution. It's also about control in a way, but in a very sort of modern technological way. But there is that friction in Aquarius between wanting to be in control and wanting to be independent. And doing things differently has become part of the Aquarian experience. And that might be the case that, with Aquarius, if the sun is weak, now you might think it's bad for the sun to be weak because it's in its detriment. But maybe if the sun is weak, it allows other things to manifest. So a weak sun can be about other personalities manifesting. Now, that might sound a bit scary, and one could be talking about mental health issues. And that is not what I'm saying. That's absolutely not what I mean. It can be about stepping back, not being tied to any one personality, any one image. And so that might be the experience of having sun in Aquarius. And I want to look at some examples of people with the sun in Aquarius to kind of try to explain what I mean. But before I look at people with the sun in Aquarius, I want to look at two organizations that have the sun in Aquarius. And one of those organizations, which I don't want to spend long on because I've looked at this chart, I suppose, ad nauseam, is the chart of Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, Hitler came to power on January the 30th, 1933, and I would have said that Nazi Germany was a very Aquarian organization. You could say a typically Aquarian organization. It shows some of the worst aspects of the sign Aquarius, wanting to be in complete control. Not just in control of the outer forms of government, but wanting to get involved in people's lives. In Nazi Germany, everything had to be subsumed by Hitler and the Führer, and so if you had a private club, People, the state still had to intervene, and certainly people had to be careful what they said in the pub or the Nazi German equivalent, because if you say the wrong thing, you might get into trouble, and that is an Aquarian thing. And at the time, Nazi Germany must have seemed very modern, and using modern technology to really assert yourself. And you think of the security apparatus, the Gestapo. That's all very Aquarian. When you think of pictures of Heydrich, he was one of the top Nazi. Was he head of the Gestapo? He really at his desk, working away, getting all these files on people, having a network of informers. That is something Aquarian, and it's very absolute. And of course, in the case of Nazi Germany, the Sun was conjunct Saturn, so it was a very Saturnine. It was a very Saturnine organization, but Saturn in Aquarius, not Saturn in Capricorn. And another organization, which I would have said epitomizes the sign Aquarius, is the World Economic Forum. So the World Economic Forum, it met for the first time on January the 24th, 1971. I don't know whether it was at 9 a.m., but I just assume 9 a.m. Of course, it met at Davos. And World Economic Forum, with its sun in Aquarius, that is all about Aquarius, believing that nation states on their own can't do very much, and if you want to make things happen, governments have to connect with each other. And the World Economic Forum is a place where leaders can come together. They can plan, they can talk about the future, and there is something, of course, very idealistic about the World Economic Forum, but in a way it's anti-democratic. You have this annoyance of people in different countries having their own ideas, having their national cultures, that you want to go beyond that, and that is completely Aquarian. But anti-democratic, is that a slur? Some would argue that it's great, the World Economic Forum. Leaders have got to come together. And so I think that in terms of Nazi Germany and the World Economic Forum, we do get a feel for what it is to be an Aquarian, or at least not necessarily at an individual level. It gives us an idea about what the sign Aquarius is actually about. Then we have a few people with the sun in Aquarius. Now, these people are all famous to some extent, and there is a certain exaggerated feel to it, and they're all very different. And I'm not even suggesting that there's anything useful to give hard and fast descriptions about the sun in Aquarius. Maybe we just shouldn't bother, but I'm going to try. So, returning to the theme of Nazi Germany, Eva Braun, Hitler's eventual wife, who he married just before he died, she had the sun in Aquarius, and she had the sun square Saturn in Aquarius. Now, you could say in her case the sun represents the life force, and Sun square Saturn might be a weak life force, although you could also say Eva Braun, female chart, she might be projecting that. So with the sun in Aquarius, she's projecting perhaps that onto the men in her life. And of course, one man in her life is, of course, Adolf Hitler, Sun square Saturn, a man who is perhaps controlling. And the question is, who is Eva Braun? Who is the real Eva Braun? Maybe her personality was never really fully able to manifest, and as soon as she got involved with Hitler, everything was taken over, and she didn't have much identity. though that's probably a generalization. She did things differently. I suppose there is something very different about getting involved with Hitler and spending the last part of your life with him. And another Nazi who had the sun in Aquarius was Julius Streicher. Now, the sun in Aquarius is often associated with intelligence because it's an air sign. And at the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis who were on trial, they had IQ tests, and Julius Streicher had the lowest IQ. I think his IQ was 106, and Julius Streicher was the editor of Der Stürmer, I think, which was a sort of propaganda paper, and he was very virulent in his anti-Semitism. He didn't actually do much. I mean, I don't know if you could actually link him directly with any deaths or atrocities. I mean, he was his career was pretty much over by the time the Second World War started. I don't think he was seen to be very effective or competent. And you see in his chart he's got Sun conjunct Mars, and so Sun conjunct Mars is just angry, pure anger. And that's what he did, and with his rabble-rousing and his anti-Semitic speeches, just stirring things up, Sun conjunct Mars. In an Aquarian way, well, perhaps you could say he was just following the party line. Maybe it didn't matter the fact that his sun was in Aquarius. Now, looking at Aquarius in a more positive light, there is the Australian comedian and, how do I describe it, drag artist, you could say. I mean, he had many different personas. Barry Humphries, one persona was Dame Edna, this sort of Australian housewife who loved the British monarchy, and I don't know, you probably know more about Dame Edna than me. And he had other personalities, and this might actually reflect the sun in Aquarius. Now, you think that the sun in Aquarius is weak because it's in its detriment, but maybe if you've got sun in Aquarius, you're able to hide who you are, and you can be someone else. And so if you want to adopt different personalities, not in a pathological way, but in terms of entertainment, having Sun in Aquarius might actually be a good thing to have. He also has Mars opposition Neptune, so having Mars rising in Pisces with that Sun in Aquarius and that Mars rising in Pisces opposition Neptune, that would have been perfect for slipping from one personality to another. I mean, he also had, earlier on in his career, he had serious alcohol problems. I think it nearly killed him, but he got over it, and that might be Mars opposition Neptune. So I would have said that Barry Humphries' chart does show a positive side to the sun in Aquarius. And if you have the sun in Aquarius, you have the capacity to do things differently and maybe to be quite shocking. For example, the author Bill Burroughs. So Bill Burroughs was sort of writing sort of cutting-edge fiction, and like a sort of part of the Beat generation, and he wrote sort of Junkie and Naked Lunch, and he was very much an Aquarius. He had Sun at 16 Aquarius, and he did things differently, and he was able to see things in a different way, and he didn't care. And that might be how Sun in Aquarius can work, just not caring, because a word that is often used with the sign Aquarius, which I often use, maybe I use it too much. I often describe Aquarians as being quite independent-minded, and I would have said that William Burroughs is pretty independent-minded. His independence was very important to him. He came from a wealthy family, and he said that getting some allowance from his family at the beginning of his career gave him independence, and it allowed him to do what he wanted to do. And of course, part of that is launching his his literary career. Another writer who had the sun in Aquarius was Langston Hughes. So Langston Hughes, that is not his, we don't have a time of birth for him, so I shouldn't really be putting any house cusps there. So Langston Hughes was a poet, and he was an African American poet. Although I think his father might have been Jewish, so he was of mixed race, but he's primarily known as being African American, and his poetry was very forward looking, and he was, I think, completely ahead of his times. And so he, in the 1930s or 1920s, he was part of the Harlem Renaissance, when you had all these prominent African American artists and writers, and people like Paul Robeson and Langston Hughes, and it seemed to him that things were about to happen in the 1920s, 1930s, that certainly from his perspective, I think he was in New York, he was able to conceive of a world where there was more equality, and then he saw the whole thing getting dashed. I think after when the recession hit, it all came to pieces, and his poetry was radical. It was very sun in Aquarius. He was a communist, or certainly was a communist by the 1920s, 1930s. He celebrated communism, and he was very anti-Christian. His poems were quite vitriolically anti-Christian. I think he saw Christianity, in terms of Christianity in the black community, as really being a slave religion, and that it was just encouraging African Americans who were dealing with intense persecution, particularly in the South, that somehow Christianity was giving them some solace, and he really opposed this. He saw Christianity, I think, as holding people back, and he was writing at the time of the rise of communism and Stalin, and he wrote a poem, seeing Stalin as I can't remember the poem offhand, but it was a poem saying, move over, Jesus Christ, let's focus on the people that matter, like Stalin and communism. This is the way forward, and that incredibly radical thing to do. And I think that Langston Hughes does, to an extent, really epitomize the sign Aquarius. And a more recent example, I suppose, if you're an Aquarian, sun in Aquarius, the sun can be undermined, and the sun, I suppose, can be rejected as a male principle. So the Israeli singer Dana International, I don't know if you've come across Dana International, she had a lot of news, I don't know, some time ago. She was very much connected with the European Song Contest, and Dana International was originally a man born in Israel and had a sex change operation. I think changed her name to, I think, I can't remember the name. Was it Sharon Cohen? And did things differently. And there you see that sun in Aquarius, a weak sun in Aquarius, born on a full moon, and so sun at its detriment. And she wanted to be a woman, went to London, had a sex change operation, and I would guess that was quite an astounding thing to do by traditional Israeli standards. I know that Israel is not necessarily a particularly traditional country, but you can imagine that going through all that, being so different, it would in some quarters have been shocking, and that might be how sun in Aquarius could work. And Oprah Winfrey, she's got sun in Aquarius. I don't want to say much about her chart, but you could say that she came from a relatively poor background and decided to do things differently, and was pretty successful at it. And there are two Supreme Court justices who have Sun in Aquarius, at least two, and there's something interesting about them. So Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee, she had the Sun in Aquarius. She has the Sun in Aquarius, and she also has the Moon in Cancer. And Brett Kavanaugh, another Trump appointee, has Sun in Aquarius and Moon in Cancer. And I do find that interesting. It does reflect the USA chart kind of backwards. The United States has the Sun in Cancer and the Moon in Aquarius. And the question you have when you've got the Moon in Cancer and the Sun in Aquarius is there's a battle there. Sun in Aquarius has a certain amount of independence. I mean, that is a side to Aquarius. You being able to detach yourself from the subjective. So if you want to be a judge, having Sun in Aquarius could be helpful. You're not going to get emotionally involved with court proceedings. It is a problem in America, the judicial system. I'm not a fan of the American judicial system. I don't like the way judges are elected, or political, or in the highest levels political appointees, because there's always the potential for bias there. And the trouble about being endorsed as a judge at the lower level, the trouble about being elected as a judge is you get endorsed, and why would someone want to endorse a judge unless they thought that judge could help them in some way? So an endorsement, the idea of endorsing judges in elections seems to be really undermining of their independence, and likewise Supreme Court judges being political appointees, that doesn't seem particularly good. But anyway, Sun in Aquarius would indicate the capacity for independence. But what happens if there's Moon in Cancer? I mean, Moon in Cancer is very subjective. And Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they both seem to have that battle. They're trying to be objective, but both of them have strong opinions, subjective opinions, emotionally based opinions, perhaps regarding their faith or their political prejudices, that Moon in Cancer. So both of them have that kind of battle, and it's a reminder that when you're looking at anything in a chart, you should not be looking at it in isolation. You have to look at the underlying picture. And there's a couple more people with the Sun in Aquarius. Yeah, you want to do things differently if you are the Sun in Aquarius. Do you want to be special? Well, you shouldn't want to be special if you've got the Sun in Aquarius, because the Sun is in its detriment. Elizabeth Holmes, what's the name of that? Theranos, was it, who had that blood testing machine, and I think she's now in prison. Elizabeth Holmes has the Sun in Aquarius, and you could say that Sun in Aquarius worked to a certain extent, that she wanted to do things her way. She didn't graduate. She took her college money to set up her own company. I mean, that's a very constructive Sun in Aquarius thing to do. But the Sun in Aquarius can be about having a weak sense of self. I mean, a strong sense of self in some respects because you're independent. But it's interesting, comparing her and Barry Humphries, that Elizabeth Holmes is known for changing her appearance and changing her voice and speaking in a strange way, because it feels it boosts her image, makes her seem more authoritative, and copying Steve Jobs and wearing a turtleneck, just wanting to be like Steve Jobs. So there you see with Elizabeth Holmes the selfhood of the Sun perhaps being undermined, being replaced by something else. And in her case, it didn't seem to be very constructive. She really wanted to be someone else, and and to be successful like someone else. And where was the real Elizabeth Holmes? She got attracted by something, by an image, and of course she didn't have the substance to see it through. When you want to be independent, you can be quite independent in terms of your views of the truth. So Alex Jones of InfoWars fame was born on February the 11th, 1974. And Alex Jones has the sun in Aquarius, being independent-minded, looking for different narratives. Sun conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius, seeing things in a larger-than-life way. But Sun conjunct Jupiter can exaggerate. So it's nice to have an independent view of the truth. And that sounds a bit crazy, having an independent view of the truth. But we are living in a post-truth era, and sometimes the truth as we see it is not necessarily the way it is, but perhaps Alex Jones took Aquarius too far. Jeffrey Epstein was an Aquarius. Jeffrey Epstein was probably an Aquarius, not for certain. I don't have a time of birth for Jeffrey Epstein, but if he was born very early on January the 20th, he would be a Capricorn. But chances are he was an Aquarius. So I have to be a bit careful about this. Was he a Capricorn? Was he an Aquarius? If he was an Aquarius, he certainly had his own way of doing things. And although he was very charismatic in his own way, he was also socially awkward, which is kind of strange, which is why he needed to have Ghislaine Maxwell very much helped facilitate his social activities and some of the contacts he needed, and of course procuring girls for him. She sort of helped him interact with society, and that might be a certain sense of that sun in Aquarius. If he has a sun in Aquarius, that it sort of needs some help, but there is some charisma elsewhere, which might be his Venus-Mars conjunction in Pisces. But I don't want to say too much about Jeffrey Epstein because we don't know for sure that he actually had the sun in Aquarius. Now, as far as some politicians are concerned, Vladimir Zelensky has sun in Aquarius, and with Vladimir Zelensky, you could say that he's a reminder of the stubbornness of Aquarius. Aquarius is a fixed sign. In his chart, he's got a lot of planets, of fixed planets: Sun and Venus in Aquarius, Moon, Mars, and Saturn in Leo. A lot of fixity there. He doesn't bend, and maybe that reflects the country he rules. When you've got a head of state who is an Aquarius, that's how your country does it. It keeps going, and Ukraine has stayed in this war in some ways for longer than expected. I think it is about to break, but when is it? People have been saying it's about to break for a long time. I thought it was going to be about to break for a long time. I think we're coming to the end, but still, he's very stubborn, very fixed, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It means you can keep going, but at the same time, you do need to change your approach sometimes. And he has not found it very easy to change. We always see him in his green T-shirt, and that's Sun in Aquarius. He doesn't change his style, his clothes, message. It always stays the same. He doesn't think about the wider global environment. He's certainly not going to adjust to it. And here is someone who doesn't have any personal planets in water signs except for Uranus and Scorpio. So he's not really feeling much. He's just saying, well, this is me in my green T-shirt, and I'm not going to change. And that could be the Sun in Aquarius. Sun in Aquarius may say something about his previous incarnation as a comedian. When you think of the Barry Humphries and I suppose Zelensky was perhaps better suited to being a comedian, adopting different roles, doing things which are sort of unusual. They might be coarse, but they're dramatic. They get people's attention. That might be how Sun in Aquarius works. So I think he does embody Sun in Aquarius, but I think maybe he should have stuck to comedy. It might have been easier. And other politicians, well, Ronald Reagan had the Sun in Aquarius, and I don't know if this is the right time for Ronald Reagan. It's a time for Ronald Reagan. And I think you could say that Aquarians like to do things differently, and they don't like to follow the established route. When he was, governor of California, he was not going to be influenced by the whole 60s stuff. He was a conservative governor of California during the height of the 1960s, and I think he put forward the idea of sort of small government, and he wasn't going to be influenced by this. He does represent, though, Sun in Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, the idea that there can actually be something traditional about Aquarius. We're not going to bend just because everyone else is radical, is protesting. We're not going to follow that. We're just going to stick with it. And that could be how his Sun in Aquarius is working. And likewise, when he became president, he was going to do things his way, and it was a change when he became president. The whole status quo and relationships between the government and the unions and the air traffic controllers, he wasn't having any of it. And he was also, in terms of the United States' battle, if you like, the Cold War with the Soviet Union, he wasn't just going to go along with the way things were. He seemed to think that the Soviet Union could, in a way, be defeated, and taking a combative approach, but at the same time having quite a good relationship with Gorbachev. Of course, the defeat of the Soviet Union arguably marked the slow decline of the United States, in a cultural sense. But I do think that Ronald Reagan does illustrate Aquarius quite well. So modern politicians with who have the Sun in Aquarius, Alice Weidel. I've talked about Alice Weidel quite recently. So Alice Weidel, quite Aquarian in her own lifestyle. She was a banker, and she has a sort of same-sex relationship. So she perhaps likes to do things differently, and probably doesn't care too much what other people think. And then she moves into politics, and is happy about upsetting the status quo, suggesting that Germany should leave the European Union with her party Alliance for Deutschland. Germany should leave the European Union, leave the euro, not caring about upsetting the post-war social democratic consensus in Germany. So I would have said that she very much does illustrate the sign Aquarius. And finally, Michael Saylor. I would have said that Michael Saylor is completely Aquarian. His embracing of Bitcoin, his embracing of technology, feeling that Bitcoin is the future, and being completely dogmatic about it. This is all Aquarian, and there is something incredibly Aquarian about Bitcoin. And Bitcoin represents perhaps a future conflict. Bitcoin can be about independence. People can use a currency which is separate from the government, but at the same time, governments want to control Bitcoin, and there's Michael Saylor trying to do things differently. And so I would have said that Michael Saylor, as someone as a person, does really show Aquarius in a good way or a bad way. I don't know, but he certainly wants to do things his way. And so far, he's been quite successful about it. So those are a few examples of the Sun in Aquarius. It's a difficult sign to pin down, but I thought I'd have a go. And now what I want to do is look at things from a perspective of the I Ching. So with this I Ching reading, just a reminder that you don't have to have your I Ching done if you don't want to. I don't want to impose anything on you. So if you've watched this video so far, you don't want your I Ching done, you can just stop the video now, and whatever I say has no relevance to you, because my I Ching reading is only for those who are listening to me. I know that last week I was a little bit negative and in my I Ching reading, and I think I did at least get one comment sort of complaining about my negativity. So in a way, I'm giving you a warning. It is possible that my I Ching reading is going to be somewhat negative. It's possible. I mean, it's not for sure, because it all depends. But so you kind of need to come into this reading not really knowing what I'm going to say. And you must be open to whatever my interpretation is, and you can take it or leave it. Anyway, I'm just giving you that warning. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, January the 20th, 2025, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And here is what I came up with. Remember, I've got 4 sections: general, money, career, and then relationships. So the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 1, which is the creative. You can see that all of the lines are unbroken. It's the first creative. It's the first hexagram. It is completely primal, and it represents the spark. It's not telling you where you're going to be creative, but it's a beginning. It's a new beginning, and perhaps that reflects the idea that the Sun has gone into Aquarius. The Sun is conjunct Pluto at the beginning of a week. Now is the time to start. And when you start being creative, you don't really have to think too much about how you're going to be creative. The point is, there is a creative impulse there. And with this hexagram, there's an association with dragons. The dragon is representative of a creative force, and it wants to make things happen. It can make things happen, and it is incredibly dynamic. So it has started, and we have a moving line. The 5th line moves, and the 5th line moving, you can see it in different ways. One way is to say that actually your influence is spreading. People are going to pay attention to you, and they're going to listen to what you say, because you do embody that creative spark. It really does show that you have got something to offer, and you're exciting. But a creative spark on its own is perhaps of limited use. It needs some kind of substance. And so it may well be that it doesn't actually really happen until it gets reflected. You need to see how people respond to your creative spark. And your influence spreads. I mean, I think you are influential. People see what you can do. You seem to be an interesting person. Remember, at the end of a week, we have a Venus trine Mars, which is about influence and attractiveness. So you're getting favourable attention, and there seems to be little doubt that you are a good influence. But it is possible that you may need another person's help. I mean, and I must emphasise that this 5th line is entirely favourable. 5th lines in the I Ching usually are, but it is a favourable line, and so you can get help, you can get feedback, and people are listening to you, And, don't be afraid of getting help from someone who is in some way superior to you. The I Ching does recommend that you should seek out the great man, whoever the great man is. When I say great man, I don't mean great man in a gendered sense. Great woman, great person, however you want to describe it. And so you seek out the great man, and you can find the great man and get support and advice. And then with the fifth line moving, that does mean we move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram 14, which is possession in great measure. Some would say that possession in great measure is the best hexagram in the book, maybe. And so possession in great measure means that you really get a strong sense of everything that you are. And possession in great measure is about everything you possess. It can be about everything you possess. It's not just your money, it's your talents, your personality, your connections, your skills. It's everything you are. And you seem to have a chance here to take this creative spark and to really throw it into the world and it can make you a kind of quite larger than life person, and you can really use who you are. And yeah, you might need some help from other people, but I do think that help is available. Now, possession in great measure can also represent things you can get hold of. So possession in great measure can be about gaining things. And so over the week, if you use your creativity and if you get help from other people, I think you can end the week sort of much richer than how you started the week. And again, when I say richer, I'm kind of using sort of more of a biblical sense of rich, rich in worth and things as well, but rich in everything. And so I think overall it actually should be a really good week. Turning to the financial picture, and this week could be quite important, at least in terms of it being some kind of new beginning. You can see that the first hexagram is the creative. So that might mean from a financial perspective, there can be a new start and you're starting to be aware of possibilities. Now, these possibilities are not, at the moment, completely concrete, but you're just aware, perhaps on an intuitive level, that things are changing, that things can happen, and you might have a sense of your own potential, the real potential to improve your finances, to find new ways of making money, for making more money. So that's certainly something you should really try to focus on. And don't worry if, to begin with, you don't actually know where this money is going to come from, because this is the creative. It's very raw. It's like the financial energy, the financial dragon has been released, and then there is a question of what is it going to do? And we have the fifth line moving, and that indicates to me that you are sending out the message to the universe that you kind of would like more money. And the universe is picking up on this message. I mean, the universe knows. I mean, don't feel that you're on your own when it comes to money, that no one knows that you'd like a financial improvement or that you'd like some money to come your way. Okay, no other humans might know, but the universe knows. And that influence is spreading. Now, it may be, because this is the creative, it is a very raw energy, that on your own you may not be able to get everything you want. And with the fifth line moving, there's the indication that you can get someone else's help, that people are available, and that if you are concerned about money and you ask for some advice, the advice will be forthcoming. And it could be a time when you can consult people in authority, or maybe make requests. So if you want more money, or maybe you want a pay rise, you can but ask, and asking may not be such a bad thing. And this hexagram, it does move. It moves to it moves to hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. And so if you're concerned about money, getting possession in great measure is really good news. I mean, it's possession. Something can come your way and you can get more than expected. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to. But, I always have this worry with a hexagram like this, possession in great measure. And I know people often do get concerned about money and possession in great measure. I don't want to be too optimistic. You're not a situation where you should necessarily expect money to come your way, expect to be showered with gold. It maybe doesn't quite work like that. But if you have an open mind and an open heart, possession can come your way. And of course, possession in great measure maybe it'll also be about a perspective. We always think about wanting money and so on, but consider what you have right now. It's possible, but when you're really honest with yourself, you don't necessarily need more money. But if you're really if you're really honest and you still think you need more money, but there is something missing, then possession in great measure does suggest that there is a way to get hold of it. Turning to career and business, and we get the first hexagram, the creative. It's important to have an open mind with the creative. The creative does not like to be shut up. I mean, after all, the creative represents a dragon. Dragons do not like to be imprisoned. Dragons do not like to be told what to do. And so consider your own creativity and what can be accomplished without pinning it down. So be open to new ideas and new possibilities. And if in terms of an old situation, so if something has been going on in the past relating to your work or your business, don't be tied to it, because the creative represents a new beginning, and aligning yourself to a new beginning and aligning yourself to new possibilities. And it may be that at work, for example, you might find yourself doing something you've never done before, or you don't know much about it, but you just have this inspiration, you have this idea. And if you're not working or looking for a job, the creative it is exciting. It opens a new possibility for you, but it's not a possibility that you can define. And with the fifth line moving, don't feel that you have to do everything on your own. Your influence is certainly spreading. People understand what you're capable of doing, but it's not a one-person show. There may be a sense in which you can benefit from other people's help. Because one thing that I Ching suggests is that you're moving into an area which, well, Greg Wincook says it's too exalted. I mean, how can something be too exalted? It's kind of too high level for you on your own. And so that might mean that you need other people's assistance. And so this might be, as you advance forward, there are new requirements, and you need other people's help in order to really make the most of your creativity. And it is creativity, it is the creative spark. And then this hexagram, the creative, it moves. It moves to hexagram number 14. And this is a very positive hexagram. And it suggests that you have what it takes. I mean, that can always be a concern, can't it? When looking at one's work and business and one's ambitions, does one have what it takes? Is one good enough? One can sometimes fall victim to the imposter syndrome. Can you really do it? Can you really handle it? But possession in great measure says, yes, you can. You really can do it because you have what is needed. And of course, possession in great measure might also relate to rewards. So you can be adequately rewarded, I mean more than adequately rewarded for what you do. And so take what you have. You have all that you need, and you can, I think, exceed your expectations. I mean, overall, it should be a really good week in terms of career and business, but just make sure that you do make the most of it and you don't try to pin yourself down, because remember, that first hexagram was the creative. The creative does not like to be restrained. You've got to be open to new possibilities, and I think that really matters. And finally, there is relationships. Relationships, we start with the creative, and the creative indicates that in dealing with other people, it's just important to have an open mind. The creative is about a new situation. I mean, hexagram number 1 is obviously by definition is the first hexagram. It's the first spark, and so if you're involved with other people, try to forget the past. Try to forget what's been done in the past, how people have behaved in the past. Just look at things afresh. And if you're looking for new relationships, well, this is a very good hexagram to start with. It's about the beginning. You don't have any expectations, any preconditions. You just see what is available. And it might be the case that in terms of your social life, that things are changing. You're meeting new people. Some of these people you might be a bit overawed by. I mean, the creative is quite an overwhelming hexagram. And the fifth line moves, and with the fifth line moving, you may feel that you're not quite up to the task, that somehow you haven't got what it takes. And maybe this is actually what relationships are all about. I mean, with that fifth line, forget relationships to begin with and just think about what it means in general. And that fifth line means you have a lot of influence. You can have a lot of influence, but you may be in a place where you need some help, you need some assistance. And it may be the very process of seeking assistance, seeking help, not because you're in trouble, but because you want to make the most of things. You seek help, you seek advice, and that very process of seeking help or getting advice allows you to form relationships with new people. And in terms of existing relationships, don't be afraid to get help from your partner or your spouse or whatever. Just ask them for something, and again, don't have any expectations about it. Maybe things have been disappointing in the past, but the past is the past. This is actually quite a forward-looking hexagram, and it moves to hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. This indicates that whoever you are, whatever your worth is, it will be recognized, and your influence will spread, and people will see you for what you are, and they will recognize your talents. And I don't think there's any concern about you being underestimated. So when people see what kind of person you are, this is going to help foster new relationships and strengthen existing ones. So that's it. I'm sorry to be so positive in these I Ching readings. As I said, I'm always concerned about being too positive, because the problem about being positive is it creates expectations, and what I don't want to do is get anyone excited about the week ahead and then be disappointed. I think it's always just important to come into these things with an open mind, not to expect anything, and then see what happens over the course of the week. So anyway, that's it. Thanks very much for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.